Welcome back, everyone. Today we have dietitian Gabrielle. Gabrielle. She's a great content creator focused on gut health. I actually learned quite a bit from her on gut health. The colon cancer fact I always say on my page, I actually learned from her. If you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Gabrielle. I'm a dietitian and another person online that is trying to help quiet the noise and help with your understanding of nutrition. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. So definitely trying to spread the word and educate about gut health and based on my education and the patients I'm seeing. And yeah,
So you do in person with patients, or you only do virtual?
I do all virtual. So I was in the hospital clinically as a dietitian, and I saw a bunch of different types of patients, but one of the floors I was on was the GI floor. And that's when I started learning more about gut health. And then I moved from Pittsburgh to Chicago like a year and a half ago. And I was seeing some patients virtually, but that's when I fully started doing social media and seeing patients virtually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What made you dive into gut health specifically more than any other area?
I always like knowing the root cause of everything, and I feel like everyone has IBS or GI issues. Like I remember, I don't know if I was in Chicago or New York, just seeing a sign that was like, hot girls have IBS and just kind of glorifying it. And I was like, well, what is IBS? And then you learn it's like, okay, well, there's a whole criteria to get diagnosed, but it's basically like you're constipated or you have diarrhea. Like there really isn't like us. So I really wanted to learn and understand what causes people to be bloated or have GI upset or have issues with their gut because even me, like throughout life, I feel like everyone has dealt with GI issues, whether that just be a bug or something more chronic. But yeah, I really wanted to understand the body, and I think it's really fascinating. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's a good background and a good passion behind it. I actually was curious because I've worked with a lot of clients that have IBS. What would you say is the number one thing that you've seen is a high success rate that people can change relatively quick in their life?
Yeah, so when it comes to IBS, gut health in general, I like to think of it as a top down. Whenever, whether you have like acid reflux or maybe you have an infection in your intestines or you got like a colon resection or something, no matter what, everybody's digestion is going to start in your brain and your mouth. So, as much as you can, like focusing on nervous system regulation. So, things the easiest things would be like the more you chew your food, the less your body has to do because the first part of digestion, beyond just thinking about food and not being super stressed when you get to mealtime, is actually chewing your food. But the more you chew your food, the less your body has to do by the time it gets to your stomach and your intestines. And at the same time, as you are starting to chew, and even when you think about food, you start to release saliva, and saliva produces a digestive enzyme called salivary amylase, which help start breaking down your carbs, but it also can help trigger the rest of your body to release enough stomach acid and release other digestive enzymes. So you don't need to like chew your food to the point of, I did a video the other day on this, like it's said to do like 20 to 30 chews per bite. That's depending on the food, that can be a lot. And I mean, you want to enjoy food. You don't want to like make it a smoothie and like gross yourself out. But the more you think about it and the slower you start to eat and just be conscious of it, you'll naturally start to notice how fast you were eating if you do eat fast. And people definitely notice a big improvement just with that.
Yeah, being more mindful. I also heard if you sit down and just smell food for around 10 minutes, it also produces the salivary gland as well. And I heard that helps with digestion as well. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah. Any thought leading up to mealtime? So, like, we have our nervous system either has the parasympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic nervous system. So, sympathetic, I think of like S equals stressed. So, the sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight, and then the parasympathetic is rest and digest. So, as the name implies, like if you are relaxed, you're going to digest your food better. So, preparing your body for mealtime allows you to rest a little bit because you know you're not working, you're not driving, you're not standing up, like actually sitting down. Your body's smart, but it doesn't really understand the difference between like you just in traffic trying to eat and like getting chased by a bear. It's like it doesn't understand. So like the more you can actually focus on the food you're looking at and appreciate and have gratitude to the food in general and the smells and all that, it can help with producing saliva because the thought of food does that.
I have a strange question, but what about people that watch YouTube videos or movies and such when they eat and they just have to have a visual reference to stimulate themselves? Do you think that's hindering quite a bit?
I think it's you have to kind of look at your day to day. So if you're the type of person that is working a lot or standing up when you're eating or you're on your phone or whatever is going to make you the least distracted, so maybe like watching TV helps you unwind a little bit or just having some background noise helps you, as long as you're still like spending a little bit of time one eating, making sure you're not shoveling food, but also looking at your plate and acknowledging that you're eating instead of just having one of those meals. Like I hate, this happens to me too, but I hate when I eat something and I'm like, I don't remember even eating. And it's because you were rushed or you were distracted. So as long as it's just back, like New Girl or something, like background, like something easy to watch, and you're not going to be completely removed from the fact that you're eating, then it should be fine. But yeah.
Appreciate the fact that you're choosing more mindful and almost holistic approaches than what I see on social media constantly. Like there's a big trend right now of olive oil and lemon juice. It's a huge trend I've noticed for fixing the gut health and the skin. Is there any validity to that massive trend you see?
I haven't even seen it. Wait, like spoonfuls of olive
A
oil?
shot, a genuine shot
Yeah.
of half olive oil, half lemon juice.
Well, I've always heard about people doing olive oil because it can help you go to the bathroom, but I mean, I would say you could look at it in a lot of different ways. You could do a shot of olive oil and there's like 120 calories and it's going to help you feel more full and satisfied before the meal. Or, I mean, there's obviously healthy fats in olive oil, but I don't really think, like sometimes people will do apple cider vinegar or lemon juice before a meal. I don't think there's a lot of science behind it doing anything. It's not equivalent to your stomach acid. It's not going to automatically, if you're doing that and then you're running around while you're trying to eat something, it's not going to help. But if it helps you get in a really good mindset that you're going to be digesting your food better, it could be a little bit of placebo, I think.
Yeah, I think people really focus on the manners as well with gut health, where you'll see people do the moss and they'll try to have all these, like they'll eat their skincare and things like that, but they don't pay attention to just getting their fiber intake or just a well-rounded diet in general, or they don't even
Yeah.
understand there's different fibers. That's another thing that people don't
Yeah.
even aware of. They'll blast soluble fiber and wonder why it's liquid. Like they wonder
Yeah.
those certain things. So actually, what are the four fibers to have people understand?
Yeah. Okay. This is my topic. I love talking about this. So, fiber, okay, people always hear about soluble versus insoluble. And I feel like that while it's relevant, it never clicked in my brain really because you can learn about like, oh, one dissolves, one absorbs, but it's like all food sources have both typically. So actually understanding what soluble versus insoluble do and then how you can adjust the food can make a bigger difference. So I like to think of soluble and insoluble as insoluble is basically what helps you go to the bathroom. It just pushes things out. It's like a broom that clears out your colon. And then soluble fiber can either do this together or some are more fermentable than others, but it can either form a gel, so it can help with forming a solid stool. So there's types of stools you want, and like a type 4 on the Bristol stool chart would be more solid. And then it can also ferment, which essentially is if you were to eat a fiber that had a lot of soluble fiber that was very fermentable, you have a bunch of different bacteria in your colon. And when you eat that fiber source, the carbohydrates get digested and everything, but the fiber part goes right through you to your colon. And the little gut bugs that you have in your colon essentially are going to be eating the prebiotics from that fiber source. So it's essentially feeding your colon and keeping it healthy. So either it's going to help you go to the bathroom, it's going to help you form a solid stool, and it's going to help feed your good gut bacteria, which can help with all sorts of things like hormones and inflammation and all that. And interestingly enough, all food sources have insoluble and soluble. So the food sources, I like to think, I call it the fiber five. There's five main foods that have fiber in them. So that'll be, fruits and veggies. Those are like the top ones that people know. But whole grains, so whether that be like chips or crackers. I mean, you can think about brown rice and quinoa and farro and all that, but if you look at the back of the label and you look at things like crackers, there could be some fiber in there. You just have to look at the label. And then the fourth group would be nuts and seeds, so chia seeds, hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds, almonds, cashews. The fifth group would be beans and legumes, so like edamame, black beans, pinto beans. So all of those food sources are going to have soluble and insoluble fiber. Typically, the skin part would be the insoluble fiber, the skin and the seeds. And then the soluble fiber is the flesh. So, sorry, I'm like continuing on. But if you are someone that has like diarrhea, for instance, and someone's like, well, eat more soluble fiber, eat less insoluble fiber, and you're like, what does that even mean? You could just peel fruits and vegetables or get rid of the seeds and cook your vegetables, and that could give you some relief depending on the situation.
Okay, and you mentioned insoluble, insoluble, and then fermented and things like that. There's a big trend of resistant starches, and if you just cool your rice, for example, I've made a bunch of videos about this, but I would love to see your opinion when, say, they have white rice and they cool it and they get that resistant starch. Is that making a big benefit on their gut health, or is it just kind of a fad?
I mean, from the research I've read, it does. I think carbohydrates are 4 calories per gram. And when you eat when you look at the food label, you'll see carbs and then you'll see fiber and sugar underneath that section. So when we're thinking about fiber and the fact that you'll hear people be like, well, fiber's not digested. Technically, when you eat a really fiber-rich carbohydrate, it's not necessarily 4 calories per gram. It might be less because your body's using it rather than like actual energy. Like your colon's using it rather than like your body using it. So if that makes sense. So from what I researched, because I wanted to understand, because so many people asked me about the resistant starch with potatoes and rice and pasta, is resistant starch is closer to 2 calories per gram. So it could make you have less calories technically and just be more full and satiated for longer. And resistant starch is a type of, technically a type of fiber. So yeah.
Yeah, I I try to research it quite a bit as well. From what I found is obviously it converts 50% less calories if it goes to the resistant starch, but from what I was finding it was around only 20 to 40% switch to that. So you're only reducing like a net 10 to 20%, which is still, if you have a lot of rice or pasta or starches in general, that's great. But I think it's a little overhyped and they're really
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the minors again. Just cooling your rice or cooling your starches is not going to make the biggest impact.
Mm-hmm.
And with social media, especially, when you see people say, hey, this is the best skincare thing in all of those trends, I guess, would you say gut health is more important for just overall skin health and acne and things like that?
I think understanding that basically everything our gut's related to, in a sense, when you really think about it, the gut really impacts, the way our hormones work and how our inflammatory response is and how our immune system is. And things like your skin, inflammation is involved. So if you have acne, for instance, there's some type of inflammation going on. And a lot of that can happen from maybe you don't have a healthy immune system overall. And that starts with your gut. So focusing on, people don't get enough fiber for one, because they're not sure where fiber comes from beyond fruits and vegetables. And maybe they don't know all the types of fruits and vegetables, or they need help with like meal planning or something like that. But the more variety you get, the more vitamins and minerals you're going to get as well. And the more vitamins and minerals you get, the healthier you are, the more strong your immune system is. And then that can help with lowering inflammation overall in your body. Depending, if you have like an allergy or something, that's obviously different. You have to take that into consideration. But
Yeah, I've dealt with wild allergies just with clients in general, where some people literally can't have like very good fiber sources, and it's really hard to work around, especially if they're vegan or things like that. There's one thing that I think is pretty shocking from when I was really diving into research of everyone's gut microbiome is different, and you mentioned how there's just different microbiomes, and everyone's gut health is kind of like your DNA strand is the best way I can compare it. It's just everyone's different. And one thing I constantly see is probiotics. People think a probiotic is the best go-to thing. And I'm curious your thoughts on probiotics, if there's a time it's beneficial or if it's
yeah.
beneficial ever.
Yeah, I think, well, probiotics, we just don't have that much research on it. And also, supplements are so unregulated. It's terrifying. Anyone can make a probiotic or a supplement, and I would say not all probiotics are created equally, beyond the fact that every supplement you get should be third party tested. There are, some pros and cons to certain, if you're looking at the back of the package of a probiotic, the transparency you're actually seeing. For instance, some will be like, they'll tell you how much bacteria is actually going to be alive by the time you consume it. But at the same time, there's so many types of bacterias and so many types of strains that if you don't actually know what your body needs, you can mess your gut up pretty easily with probiotics, because there's, a lot of them are really filled with a lot of like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, which are the two most common bacteria we have in abundance, but you don't want too much and you don't want an unequal amount. So I would say the one I do like sometimes people will prefer more broad spectrum probiotics. I've heard a lot of people like the seed one, or Megaspore, which is a spore forming probiotic. So it's supposed to survive your stomach acid. But I just think as long as you're eating, I would rather do food, because the more variety you get in your diet, the more you're going to end up getting prebiotics and probiotics. Because unless you're on an antibiotic, for instance, I wouldn't do it. And even if you are doing an antibiotic, the first one I would do over any other it's a yeast. It's called Saccharomyces boulardii. I call it S. boulardii. And that is a yeast. So if you were to be put on an antibiotic, that kills off bad bacteria that you have, but it also kills off good bacteria. You can't take a probiotic if you're on an antibiotic, because what's the point? It's going to just kill the bacteria. But if you were to take a yeast, it could help with antibiotic associated diarrhea.
Yeah, that's exactly what I found was the only time it's seen any benefit, which is
Mhm.
rare, was after antibiotics, because it got rid of literally everything and you just need to inject some bacteria inside. But like you said with supplements, I mean, that's why it's hard to even find fish oil supplements, because most are not third party tested, and just I don't know if you saw the research. I think it was over 90% of labels are off, or even like melatonin, they can be up by 800% off. So one night you could have 1 milligram, another night you can have 8 milligrams, and you're like, damn.
Yeah. And I would just make sure, if you're people are going to keep buying supplements. So just making sure they're third party tested is huge, and not just the AI Google thing. Like actually look at their website if they have something that says they're third party tested or NSF certified, because that means they're having an independent lab come in outside of their company and making sure what's in the product is actually in there.
I'm curious, if you were going to buy a supplement for fiber, what would you look for ingredients? Because everyone nowadays are ingredient warriors. So, what are some good ingredients to look out for? And then what are kind of, I don't want to call it a scam, but cheap products?
I would say, there's a ton of fiber supplements out there, but the more diversity you have, the better. So, understanding when we were talking about like soluble versus insoluble fiber, there's types of soluble and types of insoluble fiber. So, there's pectin, that's a soluble fiber that comes from apple. There's cellulose, that's the skin part of the apple, that's an insoluble fiber. There's psyllium husk is a common one people hear about. That's more of like the gel forming soluble fiber. There's, more some that are made versus natural forms. I would prefer to do a more natural form, things like banana resistant starch or things coming from potatoes or acacia fiber. I mean, there's just really so many, and I think it's so individualized. Some people will prefer one over the other, but whatever, if it helps you get enough fiber in, it's good. But diversity is really important. So you can have a supplement. I definitely have multiple. I've used psyllium husk. I like Supergut that has 4 different types of fibers, both soluble and insoluble. If you are, for instance, if you have, let's say you were diagnosed with IBS and you're just currently really bloated and uncomfortable, and you want to try to increase your fiber, but you don't know where to start, and you wanted to try something a little more gentle, partially hydrolyzed guar gum is a type of fiber. It's sun fiber, and that is a type of fiber that's more gentle in your GI tract. So doing more single ingredient ones or ones that have labeled, maybe it's like Monash approved, Monash certified, which means it's low FODMAP, that could help. But yeah.
Yeah, I selfishly asked that because the company I work with, I got to have my own fiber supplement. I always tell my clients even to not even, because it is relatively expensive because we don't mass produce it. So I always just say to get psyllium husk or just a single ingredient, and it's not marketed as gut health because I feel like the tax on gut health items that are framed as gut health, it's like a 600% charge just because it says gut health versus just psyllium husk. I don't know if you've noticed that, but like
No, I think
my,
there's a lot of, I've looked at so many, so I just feel like the ranges of the prices, they're so different. But yeah.
yeah, I mean, mine is psyllium husk and then soluble corn fiber. It's simple. It's just 10 grams of fiber, but I'm just gonna be honest, it's relatively expensive because we don't mass produce it. So I always just tell people to get the other ones.
Yeah.
Um, but if they're nice, they can support, I guess. It's just on Amazon. But I was gonna say, a lot of people will watch this and think, okay, she mentioned fiber. There's a bunch of different fibers. What's a good rule of thumb if you've never tracked your fiber, never had fiber, how to introduce it in your life safely?
Yeah. I would, I have a fiber guide that I sell that is $9, and it goes through the 5 fiber groups that I mentioned. So we have whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, fruits and veggies. And I have a list of examples underneath each of those categories. And I have them on my page as well and Google. But understanding and starting to learn where the sources are coming from can help because you actually might be eating more fiber than you think. I think if you can track, I really like Chronometer or whatever tracking app you want to use. I think it's helpful. If you're someone that doesn't want to track, at least just getting out a pen and paper and writing down the fiber sources you're eating and about how much you're getting just to get a rough estimate can be a really good place to start. And then once you have that number, so the daily average intake would be around 30 grams of fiber. I would try to gradually get there if you're not. So let's say you're at 15 grams of fiber per day. You don't want to go, the Mission tortillas are like the common example. There's certain Mission tortillas that are packed with fiber. While I think that's great, I think it's only 1 or 2 types of fibers, and I don't want people to think if they eat a Mission tortilla, they don't need any more fiber for the day because we need multiple types of fibers because they all do different things. So I would see where you're at and then try to get natural food sources of fiber before you start doing the fiber-filled pastas and the fiber-filled tortillas because those definitely can cause a lot of gas in some people because it's macro dosing fiber. So definitely aim for, I try to do, when you think of the 5 fiber groups, look at your meal or snack and try to get 3 out of the 5 fiber groups. So for instance, you might have like avocado toast and eggs would be an easy example. So the bread, depending on what you're choosing, read the label, but you can get a good amount of fiber and protein in a piece of bread. So there's your whole grain section. That's done. Avocado is also a fiber source. So if you did half an avocado, that gives you 5 grams of fiber, and that's a fruit. So you already have your whole grain in your fruit. What else could you add from maybe the rest of the categories that could give you a little more fiber? And you don't even need to measure this out if you don't want to. It's just getting into the practice of adding more to your plate, and adding more fiber sources will help you start to gradually get more fiber. So you could add like a sprinkle of hemp seeds to your avocado on top, and then you have the seeds group done. Or you could do like some arugula or a little salad on the side. There's your vegetable category. Or you can add an orange, more fruit. Just thinking about what you could add and trying to diversify your plate can give you different types of not only vitamins and minerals, but different types of fibers, because different types of fruits, different types of vegetables all have different types of fibers that can do different things for your body.
What if someone tries to introduce and they're only at 5 grams of fiber and they go to 20 and they just start all these small implementations in their day? What would happen to them if they go really, really fast?
Yeah, so on top of going very slow, so trying to maybe do, I would do like 5 additional grams every couple days. It really depends how you're feeling. So maybe printing something off where you have a list so you know exactly what has about 5 grams, which is in my fiber guide too. So you know exactly like, okay, if I wanted to add more, how much could I add? But another thing that people forget about is fiber. If you were to add fiber but not have enough water, it can just become like a rock and sit there. So you want to make sure you have enough water to flush the fiber out, or else you can get a lot of bloating or stomach cramping. So definitely increasing your water as well and trying to drink it throughout the day can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, I've seen some horror DMs. People will be like, "Hey, you told me to eat more fiber. I had 2 Mission Valley wraps, and now I'm constipated." And I'm like, "That's
Yeah.
it's a really
Yeah.
unfortunate case where they didn't add water, they went too fast." And I do the same golden rule every week: just add 5 grams. And if you add 5 grams, you get really bloated and things like that. I just say like go back down to 5 until you feel comfortable, because a lot of people introduce too fast because they get really excited trying to add more fiber. They feel really
Mm-hmm.
full. It's a great fat loss tip too.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes your stomach feel full throughout the day. And a lot of people don't pay attention to it. And like I mentioned early in the podcast, is you brought it to light for me at least. I'm sure you did for hundreds of thousands of others, is colon cancer. It is on the rise. Would you like to do a deep dive of why you think it is on the rise?
Yeah, that's another thing too. I'm 29, and I like 2022 on was just hearing more and more people having colon cancer around our age, and that is terrifying. Um, Understanding where that comes from and understanding how our food impacts our health is very important. And I think also knowing, obviously, there's systems and a lot of politics around it, and there's a lot that you can control versus can't control. I mean, education is huge, so understanding and having access to the education and the food sources can be extremely helpful, because there's a lot that we can't change, but understanding like where fiber comes from and how you can eat healthier, and what could, even if we don't have enough. I think like the biggest thing for me too is, even if we don't have enough research on something necessarily, I think just being cautious and thinking about, like for instance, like sucralose, like I think understanding that there is potential that something could be causing GI upset for you. It's okay to be skeptical if we don't have a ton of clinical data and human data and stuff like that. But I also think understanding that that could have an impact and maybe trying to limit it and focus more on whole foods can be beneficial, and not like beating yourself up if you have something with it. But noticing how your body reacts to food is really important, because there are a ton of things beyond our stress and our daily environment that can impact our gut health, and it is the food that we're eating and how much we're moving and all of that. So I think that's really important. One of the studies that I found really interesting about colon cancer was comparing rural populations to more Western diets. And in the rural populations, this community was eating closer to 50 to 120 grams of fiber per day, versus the standard Western diet is a lot lower in fiber and a lot higher in fats. and they looked at their colons before and after. So they had one group increase their fiber to 50 grams of fiber per day over a period of time. And then they had the other group lower their fiber but increase their fat. And they were able to see different inflammatory markers as well as butyrate. So when I mentioned like certain types of fibers are fermentable and it's food for your gut, when your gut bacteria eats on the fiber and the prebiotics from that fiber, that creates short chain fatty acids. And one of those is butyrate, which can have it lowers inflammation. And there are associations between that and colon cancer. So understanding, more butyrate. And it's not the same as a stick of butter. That's like one thing that I hate seeing online. The carnivores will be like, you can just have a stick of butter and get all the butyrate you need. You can't. So yeah, that's one thing about colon cancer.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how carnivores always say fiber's not essential. You don't even process it. What would you say to people that say that?
Yeah, that one's funny. Because that's the point. Your body's not supposed to use it it's not like a quick source of energy for your workout. It's food for your colon, which kind of thinking about your colon as it has its own population. So it's food for your colon, not your overall body, if that makes sense. And the more fiber you have and the more you tolerate it and it gets to the colon and can actually do what it's supposed to do, the better you will feel. I think it's just weird to try to convince people that we know fiber's good for us. I don't get it. I don't know.
Yeah, the argument of saying something's not essential as well is such a unique argument considering the society we live in. We don't do things based on
Hmm.
essentialness. We do things like you don't need to work out. You don't need to walk. These
Yeah,
are not essential
exactly.
things for your life, but you do it to improve your life, to improve your health. And that's what
Yeah.
fiber and carb sources do. That's only improving your life. And as you said with the colon cancer, I actually didn't see that study. That's a really cool study. Most of my research, unfortunately, was really vague on beyond 29 grams of fiber. They noticed gains
Hmm.
and benefits, but they'll stop at 29 and
Hmm.
not actually say how much fiber after 29, which really bothered me because I was like,
I know which one you're talking about. Was it like the meta-analysis that showed like heart health and type 2
yeah,
diabetes and how like 10 grams of fiber can lower your risk of colon cancer by like 10%?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's because people didn't go above 29 grams of fiber. Oh no, yes, they did. And they said they noticed benefit,
Yes,
but they
they just
didn't.
didn't specify how much they ate. They just said
Hmm.
29 plus, which I was like, come on, like we're doing a study, at least try to standardize how much we're eating.
I, I say 50 once you get as best as you can. But yeah, I know. I agree. But I think the more we have studies like that, and hopefully over time, the more we talk about this, there will be more studies actually looking at like 50 grams. It just, awareness, I think, will help.
I think personally, 50s rookie numbers. Personally, I do 80. I like to have around 80, which is crazy. A lot of people,
I'm just trying to not have people get a stomach ache or something.
yeah, I go really slow on like going up. I've done this for years, but it
Yeah.
helps me feel really satiated and I really enjoy it. It makes me
80's
feel
great.
feels
Yeah.
great. One thing I've noticed that a lot of people don't pay attention to, and I like to preach quite a bit, is eat as many colors as you can coming
Hmm.
from vegetables. Could you elaborate a deeper reason why people should try to eat as many colors as they can from vegetable or natural sources, not food dyes, obviously?
Yeah. So I do a couple different challenges on my page and with patients and friends, family, whoever wants to join. And when we think about the 5 fiber groups, so like 3 out of the 5 sources at least at all of your meals, one that's automatically going to make you have to get creative and probably have more color. And then there's also a challenge I do where you try to get like 50 different plant sources a week. So you get out your notes app or pen and paper and you try to get up to like 50 different plant sources. So that's also going to help you get some more color, as well as just like every time you go to the grocery store, getting it like 2 to 3 different colored fruits or vegetables, because it's eat the rainbow. The more colors you have, the different antioxidants and polyphenol benefits that you get, which can also antioxidants help with lowering inflammation, oxidative stress. So yeah, the more colors and basically the more variety, which will help you get more colors, will help because you're just going to end up getting more nutrients that you probably are lacking.
Yeah, I think it's a great way. The gamification of stuff, I think, is the best way to approach any form of bettering your health because it's more enjoyable if you gamify and just
Mhm.
have friends to do it with. So I always recommend everyone, if you have friends, if you have accountability buddies, if you join Facebook groups, just have someone to talk to and have a common goal. I think it's a great way. So you gamifying it, having the 50 things, I think it's great. One thing about gut health I feel like is not spoken enough about is bloating. People think bloating is a way you can eat food and get zero bloat. A lot of people think they can eat a huge meal and have zero bloat. At least people on social media like to talk about that. Can you elaborate what bloating is and ways to reduce it or completely get rid of it if it's possible?
Yeah, I think understanding if you are truly bloated and knowing your body, I think there is sometimes people think any sort of distension is bloat, but if you eat food, it's natural, or you drink a lot of water or something like that, it's natural for you to be more bloated. And things that can help with bloat are calming your nervous system, one. So when we're thinking about eating, you don't want to be standing up while you're eating. You don't want to be running around while you're eating. You want to actually try to be as mindful as possible so your body actually knows that it needs to digest food. Because if you don't let your body know and you're more focused on other things, then your body's not going to digest your food properly, and that can cause more bloating. So things move the more you chew, the less your body has to do. It goes through you a little quicker and safer versus like your body has to do everything. It's constantly like being filled with stuff. It's going to be bloated and uncomfortable. There's obviously like more complex things that can happen, like maybe you got food poisoning and you ended up with a big imbalance in your gut, and maybe you have like H. pylori, which is an infection in your stomach, or SIBO or something like that, and those can be treated more like naturally, or sometimes you need antibiotics. It really just depends on the situation. But the core thing is like always calming your nervous system and doing as much as you can, like chewing your food, getting diversity can really help, because if you're constantly like feeding yourself the same types of fibers, or you're only eating things with added fiber in them, those can cause bloating because your body has a harder time breaking those things down versus like natural food sources. Also thinking about like when I mentioned like sucralose, so sugar alcohols and artificial sweeteners, and thinking about how those impact you can also be really helpful, because for some people, things like sorbitol and xylitol and mannitol, those are high FODMAP, so they can cause bloating because they're really fermentable. So you're having a lot of fermentable fibers all at once that can cause a lot of bloating, as well as like eating too fast can cause bloating. And yeah, there's just so many things that can cause it. So I think just learning your body and trying to really look at the ingredients you're eating and see if you're not sure what's impacting you, considering maybe swapping something and seeing if you feel better. There's also people that, feel better without gluten or dairy, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good distinction between just having normal distension because you're adding volume in your body, drinking water or food,
Yeah.
versus actual bloat. I think one of the most unique cases I've experienced where you mentioned the nervous system is someone could be underweight and extremely lean, and that can affect their gut health or bloating quite a bit. And
Hmm.
I'm curious what your approach would be if someone is not malnourished, but under the size they should be for body fat and weight in general, how to approach gut health when you're at that level in your life where it's not a lot of winning situations you could be in.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting that we also might not think about all the time is the fact that we need certain vitamins and minerals in order to produce enough stomach acid or make enough stomach acid. So, for instance, like magnesium. And if you don't have enough stomach acid, you can't absorb your B12. You have to kind of think about the body as a whole system. There's a reason why there's macronutrients and micronutrients. The micronutrients can help really drive our body's processes. So understanding and making sure you're maybe like if you were to need a multivitamin, for instance, that could possibly help you digest your food better because maybe you aren't getting enough of those nutrients, and then slowly working on increasing the diversity in your diet as best you can depending on the situation. Like A lot of people, if they have more restrictive eating patterns, they notice a lot of either they're constipated because they're not eating enough, or they're bloated and uncomfortable because they are more malnourished. You want to obviously work on whatever's going on psychologically, but also maybe supplement with a multivitamin, or work on getting as many nutrients as you can, because your body won't work as well. And then if your body's not working as well, you could be more bloated chronically.
Yeah, the approach I took was a slight surplus just to get body fat on the body and having normal functions of hormones and things like
Yeah,
that, and increasing fat probably substantially in comparison before, because they're having, you're gonna be shocked, under 15 grams of fiber, or not fiber, fat, which is a
I
big.
don't even know how that's possible. That's wow.
And it's because they followed other influencers that say fat wasn't
Yeah.
essential, or if it's too dense in calories because it's 9 calories per gram rather than 4 with protein and carbs. And so they would avoid it. A lot of people don't understand. They actually feel more satiated because they're actually able to produce things like leptin. And I think that's a good
Mm-hmm.
question for you is how how does gut health correlate with fat loss?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways, but for instance, fiber makes you feel more full and satiated for longer because it can help with increasing. I mean, there's certain fermentable fibers that can help with GLP-1 release. It can help with ghrelin and leptin, so making you feel more full and satisfied or triggering hunger. And then it can also impact your insulin release. So if you're eating things that have more fiber in them, you're not constantly releasing insulin, for instance, then your body's not having to constantly get sugar out of your blood and move it to the cells for energy. So fiber can help with stabilizing, depending on the situation, the hormones that are being released, and releasing them in a more beneficial way.
I couldn't agree more. Gut health, in my opinion, is the starter for everything for your health, because if you have a bad gut health and you try to treat something, for example, acne, with the best skincare process ever, but if your gut health is out of whack, your acne will most likely not be getting cured at the rate you think it would be. Or if you're in a fat loss phase and you've never cared about your gut health and you do carnivore, you get extremely gassy, or long term, you're eating 200, 300 grams of protein, which if you have that much
Yeah,
protein at
that's
150
another
pounds.
thing. Yeah. Sorry, go
And
ahead.
that's what I was going to ask you is, if you're not paying attention to these things, for example, eating 2 grams of protein per pound you weigh with no fiber intake, what would that do to your health?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about fiber, I don't want anyone to think that I'm like only pushing fiber, because I love protein. I love omega-3 fatty acids. There's three macronutrients. We need all of them. We need omega-3s help with lowering inflammation too. So you could just be omega-3 deficient, and that could help with your bloating. Maybe you're eating enough fiber, but you're eating no healthy fats at all. So you're inflamed, or you're eating too much protein, or as you get older, you can naturally produce less stomach acid. You can also be on medications like PPIs that can make it harder to produce stomach acid, which, if you don't have enough stomach acid, it's harder to break down food in general, but protein especially. So a ton of people are not breaking down their protein. Or interestingly enough, so when you're eating the fermentable fiber and how that's food for your colon, if you don't feed yourself fiber, if you're not eating enough fiber, the gut bugs in your gut still have to eat, and they can ferment protein. And then you can have smelly farts and just be gross. Your body is just going to ferment what it has. And that can release toxins into your body, the fermentation of protein. You don't want that to happen. Oh, yeah.
Big talking point I say in all my reviews is the protein farts, and I'm obsessed with the omega fats in general, because a lot of people look at total fat and think that's the whole story. Especially carnivores are a very meat dominant animal food, or animal based diet, I think it's called. And they look at total fat and they think, hey, if this is zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.5 grams of fat, that's going to regulate my hormones. But if you look at their omega 3 to omega 6, they'll have zero point 0.5 grams of omega 3 and 20 grams of omega 6. And they're wondering why they're still inflamed, yet they're trying to eat their healthy fats and they think it's, hey, this is going to make you healthy. What would be good? What are some good fats people should pay attention to beyond just total fat throughout the day?
Yeah, so another reason, a big reason for inflammation that we have in America is that we have too many omega 6s versus omega 3s. So if you're looking at maybe you're tracking your food, there are monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. And there's also omega 3s and omega 6s. And you want both. Inflammation isn't bad. Omega 6s can help with, sometimes you need to have a little inflammation in order to get better. I mean, that's how the body works, but you don't want too much chronically. So unfortunately, we have too much omega 6s versus omega 3s. So you want to have more omega 3s than omega 6s. And the reason that can be hard to get is because the two omega 3s that you want and a lot of would be EPA and DHA. Those are fatty acids that help your brain function, you move, like lower your inflammation. But those can be hard to get. You want like a certain amount. I would say like 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams combined, depending on the person. But if you aren't eating like 3 to 4 servings of fatty fish every week, you're not going to be getting that. So people don't know that and they don't supplement with it, or they're not eating enough fatty fish in general to get that. So you could either supplement or, I mean, I think sometimes people will think like the plant sources will give you enough, but it usually won't. So I think just knowing that, one, not everything can be from food like all the time, and it's okay if you have to, it's best to test your labs and stuff, but it's okay if you have to supplement, but also just being aware that a lot of times, like in the processed packaged foods, you're not getting an omega 3s, you're getting omega 6s, you're not getting, so thinking about the whole seed oil debate, like if you're only eating processed packaged foods, you're just getting too many calories and you're getting a lot of oils, and that's giving you a lot of calories and you're not getting any omega 3s. So it's kind of just thinking about the diet overall. I don't even remember what your question was.
No, you added a bunch of really important things. I'm going to dive deeper on so people can understand it because I think you're so smart. It's hard for
Sorry.
people to get it sometimes. You said a really key thing, EPAs and DHA. So when people are getting omega-3 supplements, a lot of brands don't mention, like you should look on the back of your
Mm-hmm.
label and it should say the actual percentage rather than just saying other omega sources because they could be ALA source. She alluded to with the plant-based,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of people say chia seeds and walnuts are very dense in omega fats. The only thing is with omega fats, if they're ALA source, you only convert around 10% of it,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't bioavailable, not really great for the body. So when people say chia seeds are this master food, I would look at it more as a fiber base rather than an
Yeah.
omega base. And you mentioned another really key thing where the ratio is why Americans are not healthy. And my biggest pet peeve is when clients buy an omega 3, omega 6, and omega 9 because you're not really in control. If you're getting an omega 6, you're getting 20% because the average ratio is 1 to
You
20.
probably don't need more.
Yeah, so why are you buying this in bulk or combination?
Yeah.
Because they see it and they think it's great.
It's so hard.
Yeah,
I feel bad.
the biggest challenge I've seen, for me at least, if a client's Muslim and they can't have gelatin or gelatinous sources, and a lot of fish oils are gelatinous based, and it's really hard to find a third party source, omega 3, for Muslim clients because there's not that many non gelatinous omega 3 that's third party tested because fish oils are a very special supplement. They're one of the most dysregulated supplement. Like they've
Hmm.
actually had studies where people's health was worse taking omega supplement because most of the time omega supplements are just not great. And
Yeah.
I usually have a good 3 rule of thumb if you're getting an omega supplement. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Is if it smells really fishy, it's usually low quality. If it's stuck together, really low quality. And I like to say it's like urine. The clearer it is, the healthier it is. The darker it is, not good. That's a good rule of thumb I always like to tell people because it's hard to find a good source on Amazon or anywhere.
Yeah. I have 3 videos and I've made a list of ones that I've liked because so if it smells, that means it's rancid, which essentially any oil, if it is old or if it goes under oxidative stress, it'll start to smell. So that means it's gone bad. And that's how a lot of them are, because for whatever reason. And then another thing is, so obviously omega 3s can help with inflammation, but yeah, omega 3 supplements are so bad that they could just cause more inflammation. Another thing I look for is like, yes, third party testing, but because I try my best to find supplements that are IFOS certified as well, because they will have another party look for like mercury and heavy metals, because they can use any source of fish, and certain fish are going to be higher in mercury than others. So that's another thing to consider. So if sometimes people might, not feel great if they're taking an omega, maybe it's causing inflammation for them.
I didn't know that actually, because the brand I work with is not mine, but it's just a good brand that actually shows the EPA and DHA.
Hmm.
It only has FDA and GMP for the third party sources. I didn't know there's that other one for mercury. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
there's like a whole website on it. And then some companies, it's kind of hard to know, but I know Carlson's, that common one, is IFOS certified, but yeah, I'd have to look back at my video. So it's like another little thing to add on, but it's
You
hard to
also
find.
mentioned omega 3 and omega 6. You mentioned avocado and toast, for example. What do you think of omega 9 fats?
Good, but I feel like we don't really talk about them as much. Like I think people will eat avocados to get omega 3s, but it is higher in omega 9s. Honestly, I don't feel like I know that much about omega 9s.
No, you're good. It's not really the essential, but it does help with
Hmm.
like skin and things like that a little bit. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people think avocado toast is like the send all be all for health and standard, which it could be if it's like a whole wheat piece of bread and it's a great healthy fat for your body. But I think it's a little overhyped, especially for if you're just eating avocado toast for breakfast. I think pairing it with a protein source would be incredible.
Yeah, absolutely pair it with a protein source. You have to pair up, like every meal needs to have a fat, fiber, and protein. That's the best way to think about it.
How do you feel about people? Because I'll be honest, like I try to research everything like this, but sometimes I don't live by it. I'm kind of an ingredient warrior where one meal would be mostly protein, another meal would be mostly carbon fiber, and another meal would be mostly fats. How do you feel like
Really?
people like that?
Wait, how? How do you eat? I don't get it.
So I'm very interesting because I'm usually really busy with work and stuff like that. So I eat usually just chicken breast or whatever protein source I want all in one go. And then I'll hit my fiber all in one go, or I'll hit my carbs before a workout all in one go,
So
which
you
is
have
a
80
very,
grams of fiber at once?
yeah. And it
Oh my
doesn't,
gosh, that's crazy. That's
yeah. And
impressive.
I've never had an issue with bloat. I don't know if I just have a gut steel or something, but even when I was first starting, I went to 80 grams pretty rapidly. But I do drink a lot of water, very active. So I think that played in
Hmm.
favor. And I'm larger than most people, around 218 pounds. So I feel like doesn't affect as
Yeah,
much.
80 is not as much for overall
Yeah.
calories, probably.
So how do you feel
Huh.
about people that are kind of ingredient warriors? I've noticed more male clients are like that I've worked with at least, and it's more of like a male trait.
Yeah, I honestly haven't had, I've seen a lot of patients. I've been a dietitian for almost 5 years, but I really don't have a lot of people eating like that. I mean, I worked in pediatrics, so I worked in a whole feeding clinic, so I'm used to, different preferences like that. But as long as you're still getting all the nutrients you need in the overall day, I don't see what would matter.
The only reason I ask that is the only thing, the caveat I would add, especially if anyone's listening, I would not do it. First off, it's not really the most optimal way to diet.
Yeah.
It's definitely a weird kind of psychopath way to diet, just kind of you're busy. But one thing I always like to say is don't try to have all your carbs in one go and always pair carbs with protein or fiber because you mentioned
Yeah. Yeah.
earlier with the insulin response, insulin isn't inherently like a bad thing like the internet tries to
Mm-mm.
make it out to be. It's a natural occurring thing in the body. But when you don't pair certain sources and your insulin goes down, you actually get a spike in hunger, which actually is the reason people overconsume. And that's why if you have elevated insulin constantly, you're just naturally hungrier. And I think a cool study, I don't know if you ever read it, was they had someone that had a high carb diet versus a high protein and high fat diet, and they ate the same amount of calories, basically high insulin versus low insulin diet. And they both, the exact same result, lost the same amount of weight. But when calories were not regulated, the high carb diet gained weight. What a shocker.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's because when you have naturally a high carb diet, it spikes your insulin, which in theory makes you hungrier, eats more calories.
Yeah. So I think Understanding when you eat any carbohydrate, your pancreas will release insulin to move the sugar from the carbohydrate out of your blood into your cells for energy. And then it just goes back. But if you're constantly eating a lot of carbs and you don't have any fiber and your body's not sure, your insulin's just going to be released and released and released constantly, and that can cause insulin resistance, which can cause a bunch of other issues. So yeah, that's a good point. I'd have to think about that question longer, I think, but definitely don't eat all your carbohydrates in one sitting. And I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, especially from the fiber standpoint. I think everyone is so different, so like some things are going to work for people more than others, but I definitely feel like if you aren't used to fiber and you're trying to increase it, that wouldn't be the way to go.
Yeah, that's why I put the nuance of
Even protein, it can cause more like GI upset for some people, but if you're used to like a higher protein diet, then it'd be fine.
yeah,
So
that's
yeah.
another common myth I see is you can only consume a certain amount of protein in one sitting for like bioavailability and digestion. There's one cool study, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, where they had 100 grams of protein in one sitting and they still were absorbing beyond. So we don't even know the cap out, which makes complete sense. If you eat 10,000 calories in one sitting, you're still absorbing the 10,000 calories. It doesn't
Yeah.
magically just go away. So why would it change with a macronutrient? If you could, to kind of close this out, because we've been talking for a fair bit of time, what would be a good three-step process that anyone could follow to just start getting a better gut health?
If I were to try to improve my gut health right now, I would try to do the plant diversity challenge, and I would try to just start listing out all the plant sources I'm eating and trying to get to 50 plants. So if you're having like anything in the perimeter of the grocery store, fruits, vegetables, even beans can count. Any fiber source is really going to count in its natural state. So just really thinking about what you're getting, and it can be really helpful. You don't have to get to 50 in the first week, but it'll just help you get a little more creative when you go to the grocery store and when you're making your meals, just swapping out different types of vegetables in order to get that goal as best as you can. And then I would say work on eating slower. I would practice at one meal just counting how many chews you have per bite and see how close or far you are to like 20 to 30 chews, and then chew something. I mean, it's going to be different if it's like steak versus maybe salmon, but chew it 20 to 30 times and just see what the consistency is. So then you can gradually start to, you don't necessarily need to chew that many times per bite, but just gradually start to eat a little slower and try to be a little more mindful at your meals. And then I don't know if these are very easy steps, but I would try to get 3 out of the 5 fiber groups at all of your meals and see if that helps you getting your fiber goals and also with tolerating fiber.
Be your 3 most overhyped or could be actually counterintuitive that you've seen on social media for your gut health? 3 things that people are doing.
You don't need to go on the carnivore diet in order to heal your gut. It's just removing a lot of triggers. So it can kind of be it can help with your symptoms, but it isn't a good diet for you long term based on, all the vitamins and minerals that we need. So, not focusing solely on something like that in order to heal your gut. And then same with like cleanses and things like that. Just be cautious of it. Like if you're doing a cleanse, you could be also getting rid of all the good gut bacteria. So it's like you don't want to be, doing crazy things in order to clear out your gut, because you don't want to clear out your gut necessarily, because then you're getting rid of all the good stuff you have. And then,
You feel about sea moss?
yeah, I feel like what is don't people say stuff about minerals? Like it has all the vitamins and minerals you need. Doesn't it not? I don't
No,
even think it has all of them. Like
no, it doesn't.
if
I've
you
made
want to
so
eat
many
sea
videos
moss, you
reviewing it.
can, but I'm pretty positive, yeah, it doesn't have, they say like I don't even know what they say about it, but
Every diet I review right now is eating the sea moss, and I don't understand the hype because the research is not conclusive on it whatsoever, and there's not that much research on it in the first place because who's eating sea moss as a study? Like,
yeah, I don't really think, you probably don't need to spend a lot of money in order to heal your gut necessarily. There's a lot of easy things that you can do every single day, like looking outside, that can help your gut rather than like buying something crazy. If it helps you feel better, go for it. But like, you really don't necessarily need to just go buy something. There's a lot that you can just start doing at home for free.
Yeah, I also appreciate the different perspective because my golden rule I always tell people when they just first start out is try to get enough fiber in the day. I always say 30 to 40. Work your way up 5 grams per week. Get daily movement because people don't understand daily movement also helps the gut health and digestion and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And then just drinking water in as many colors as you can. Those are my
Yeah.
good golden rules to just start out because I feel like those are really basic things that people overlook, and they love to look at the things that only accomplish 1% of the end result versus the 99%, which
Yeah.
as content creators, we know that's what everyone focuses on is the 1% difference in the day to day. Well,
Yeah.
do you have anything you want to plug or have any out or ending thoughts or anything like that?
No, thank you for having me. I'm glad we could finally meet. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. My handle is dietitian with a T, dietitian.gabrielle. People say it wrong all the time. And yeah, if you want my fiber guide or I see patients, and always here to answer questions and
Awesome.
educate. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure
Yeah.
speaking to you.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.